Alright, thank God it's fantasy football season. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is Redemption Rehab. If you tuned in today, it's for one reason. It's to start winning championships in fantasy football. Today, we're talking about my top picks on the weekly waiver wire that'll help you get the job done. So let's head over to the weekly waiver wire report
and check out the facts.
Alright, yeah! Here we are on our website talking waiver wire for week 12. We've got some great players for you to look at this week. I don't care if you need running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, or any other position players, we have answers. This is an important week for most leagues. Most leagues start at playoffs in week 14. We've got players that you need to know about to help you make a push for a championship in 2019. So let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Like always, we always start out with running backs and who's available for week 12. And if you get a chance, you need to go over to the waiver wire and see if these running backs are available. Starting with Jalen Samuels of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who rushed 5 times for 26 yards and had 5 receptions for 19 yards with 1 TD on 6 targets. His handcuff, if James Conner's not available to play, is Trey Edmonds, who rushed 3 rushes for 11 yards and had 3 receptions for 27 yards on 3 targets. The starting running back for Pittsburgh is James Conner. He clearly has a shoulder injury and may have trouble playing in week 12. It may linger, and if you own James Conner, you better have Jalen Samuels as his handcuff, and guess what? You better pick up Trey Edmonds also. Let's look at some running backs in week 12 that you might want to look at. Starting with the Indianapolis Colts situation. Marlon Mack broke his hand, and they've got a slew of running backs that could take his place in case he can't play on Thursday night. I'm pretty sure he won't be playing. So let's take a look at the 3 running backs that are going to take his place that might help you get a win in week 12. Starting with Jonathan Williams, who had 13 rushes for 113 yards and 1 reception for 31 yards on 1 target. Or how about Nyheim Hines, who rushed 3 times for 11 yards. He had a TD and also had 3 receptions for 24 yards on 4 targets. Veteran players like myself know that the handcuff to Marlon Mack has always been Jordan Wilkins. He got hurt with an ankle injury in week 10 and didn't play in week 11. So guess what? We have to figure out which one of these 3 we're going to go for. I don't think Jordan Wilkins is going to play in week 12, but I tell you what, bet Jonathan Williams does. And if you need a running back this week, maybe because of buys or injuries, my bet is Jonathan Williams. Or maybe you want to pick up Nyheim Hines. He's not a bad running back either, especially in a PPR league. But the guy you really want is Jordan Wilkins. Why? Because he's the actual handcuff in case Marlon Mack is out for the year. Let's take a look at some other running backs you may want to consider this week, like the Detroit Lions' Bo Scarborough, who was just signed. He had 14 rushes for 55 yards and 1 TD. You may remember the name Bo Scarborough from Alabama. He was a good player in college. Didn't do well in the pros, but you know what? He's getting a second chance for Detroit. Wouldn't surprise me if he got some goal line carries and helped them make a push for the playoffs this year. As difficult as it sounds, they might still have a chance. Bo Scarborough's his name. He might be worth a pickup. Let me give you some other running backs you should be considering this week, like the San Francisco 49ers fullback Kyle Juszczyk. The name sounds tough, but he's a good football player. He's a fullback and he had 7 receptions for 63 yards on 7 targets. He's getting lots of playing time right now because Matt Breida's hurt, and And Kyle Juszczyk is one of the guys they stick in there. He's a great fullback, a great blocker, and when people get hurt, they put him in the game. If these guys, Matt Breida and George Kittle, come back, which I expect them to the next time they play, Kyle Juszczyk probably won't be used very much. So don't try to spend a lot of money to get him. But he might be useful in week 12 if those players don't play. Let me give you some other running backs to keep an eye on in week 12 of the NFL season. Like, how about the Atlanta Falcons' Brian Hill, who's the handcuff to Devontae Freeman? Or how about the Baltimore Ravens running back Gus Edwards, handcuffed to Mark Ingram? Don't forget about the Dallas Cowboys' Tony Pollard, the handcuff to Ezekiel Elliott, and the New York Jets running back Bilal Powell, handcuffed to Le'Veon Bell, are some sleepers to watch for week 12. Look, having handcuffs to players that are running backs is important all year, but heading into the playoffs, you have to have their backups. If you have Ezekiel Elliott on your team, you better have Pollard as on your team also, because if Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt, you got his backup. That's part of fantasy football. You should have had him all year. I know he takes up a spot on your bench, but you know what? If something happens to your primary running back, you gotta have his handcuff. Let's go take a look at some wide receivers that can help you in week 12 of the NFL season. Okay, the wide receiver we're going to throw at you first is a guy we've been talking about since before the draft. He's on a lot of waiver wires, and he's getting a lot of playing time because of injuries to starters. And his name is Deebo Samuels of the San Francisco 49ers. He again had 8 receptions for 134 yards on 10 targets because he got some playing time because of the injuries to George Kittle and Matt Breida. Once those guys come back, you won't see as much targets or even yardage from Deebo Samuels. But it's important to know, this kid can play. He's going to have big games this year and in the future. So in the future, we're going to be targeting him in drafts. And next week, he might get a chance to show up big again. Let me give you some other wide receivers that can help you this week in case you need some, because of bye weeks or injuries. Starting with the Dallas Cowboys' Randall Cobb. He had 4 receptions for 115 yards with 1 TD on 7 targets. He's getting a little more playing time because Amari Cooper's been banged up. Maybe that's why Dallas didn't sign him. He's a good player, Amari Cooper, but you know what? Seems like they can find good players. They have in the past, and I don't know. Not sure they're going to sign him. But Randall Cobb's who we're talking about. And you know what? He does this every year. He's a veteran player. He has a couple good games. Then you don't hear about him for a while. So be careful. He gets injured a lot too. Let me give you some other wide receivers you should consider, like the Miami Dolphins' Devontae Parker, who had 7 receptions for 135 yards on 10 targets. Who else did the Dolphins have to throw the ball to? I mean, they basically got rid of half their team. They're trying to tank, but they got a good coach. They got a quarterback that's a backup on like 10 teams. He wants to win. You know, these guys play football to win, but they don't have a very good team. And who else does they have to throw the ball to? Devontae Parker has frustrated fantasy players over the years, but you know what? He'd be somebody I'd be looking for on my waiver wire, and he's actually available in a lot of leagues. Let me give you another wide receiver you should be considering because of injuries this week, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers' James Washington. Last week, he had 3 receptions for 49 yards on 5 targets. He is someone to watch because of injuries to Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson, who might miss some time because of injury. Man, that was a rough game for the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We don't get into that kind of stuff here, but hopefully we don't have to see stuff like that happen in the NFL ever again. But man, did the Steelers take it on the chin in injuries. Both Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson might not play this week. So James Washington is a guy I'd keep my eye on. Let me give you a couple other wide receivers you can consider this week. Maybe if you have a need and you have no other choice. And that is the Chicago Bears' Taylor Gabriel, who had 7 receptions for 57 yards on 14 targets, Or fellow wide receiver on the Chicago Bears, Anthony Miller, who had 6 receptions for 54 yards on 11 targets. Look, the quarterback situation in Chicago is terrible. I mean, Trubisky, it looks like they made a mistake. We got to give him some more time. But they just can't throw the ball to just Allen Robinson every week. Teams know they're going to start taking him away. But they do have good receivers in Taylor Gabriel and Anthony Miller. I think they're both healthy, and you know what? They may be good for a spot start in case you're in need in week 12 or down the road. Might be worth stashing on your bench. Let me give you some sleeper wide receivers you should be considering for the rest of the year. Like the Oakland Raiders, Hunter Renfrow, who had 5 receptions for 66 yards on 6 targets. Or how about Alex Erickson, who could see more extended playing time because of the injury to Auden Tate for the Cincinnati Bengals. Or maybe you want like the San Francisco 49ers Kendrick Bourne, who had a TD catch. And then there's a sleeper that you should be considering in the future, and that's Tampa Bay's Scotty Miller, who's starting to show signs that he's a player in the NFL. Someone we're going to be looking out for as a sleeper in next year's draft. Let's go take a look at some tight ends that can help you for week 12 or maybe your playoff push for a championship. Okay, here we are looking at some tight ends. I'm telling you what, I'm going to give you a veteran tight end that's been around for a while. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers forgot about him, but guess what? He didn't forget how to play football. His name is Cameron Brate. He had 10 receptions for 73 yards on 14 targets. With O.J. Howard, the starting tight end, losing confidence, it could be the Cameron Brate show for the rest of the 2019 season. He'd be worth somebody I'd be going out and getting. 10 receptions? That's a lot. I just think Tampa Bay has lost confidence in O.J. Howard. He's probably in a bad situation, maybe just on the wrong team. Go out and get Cameron Brate. And if you have a problem at tight end, you might want to consider starting him this week. Let me give you another tight end that you should be considering this week that is also a veteran, and that is the New York Jets' Ryan Griffin. He had 5 receptions for 109 yards and a TD on 5 targets. Ryan Griffin has put up some numbers this year. We have mentioned him all year, and he continues to produce. But for some reason, he's still on the waiver wire for you to pick up in a ton of leagues. Go out and get him. He's one of Sam Darnold's favorite targets around the goal line. Let me give you another tight end you should be considering in week 12. Like the backup tight end to George Kittle on the San Francisco 49ers. His name is Ross Dwelling. He had 4 receptions for 14 yards and 2 more TDs on 3 targets. With the injuries to George Kittle and Matt Breida, someone's got to catch the ball, and it's Deebo Samuels and apparently Ross Dwelling. I wouldn't spend a lot of money on him, but if you have George Kittle, you better go out and get this guy on your team. Let's talk about a couple more tight ends we've been talking about for weeks now. And if you had him on your team, you did well. But now time is running out. And that's the Minnesota Vikings' Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith. Both have been scoring TDs with the absence of Adam Thielen. They're on bye this week, but I'll tell you what, Adam Thielen's coming back, and they're not going to see the targets they saw when he was gone. The wide receivers are where it's at in the running game in Minnesota. Tight ends, they can play. You had a chance to get them. We mentioned them every week for probably 3 weeks. This is the last time we'll mention them. Should have got them when you could. They both had touchdowns in week 11. If you didn't do it, I don't know what to tell you. Hey, let me give you some sleeper tight ends that might help you the rest of the year. Like Dallas Cowboys' Jason Witten. Or how about the Buffalo Bills' Dawson Knox? Or maybe the New England Patriots' Ben Watson? Or how about the Cincinnati Bengals' Tyler Eifert? Tyler Eifert might start to see some action now that Auden Tate might miss some time. He had a serious neck injury in Oakland. He might have to miss a few weeks. With AJ Green looking like iffy, they don't have a lot of options. We did mention Alex Erickson in our wide receiver segment, and we're telling you right now, you might want to consider picking up Tyler Eifert or even CJ Uzomah because they got to throw the ball to somebody. Let's go take a look at some quarterbacks you could be considering in week 12 or for the rest of the year. Okay, we told you last week about Daniel Jones of the New York Giants having a great playoff schedule in case you need a backup quarterback. He's got a great schedule, but let me give you a couple more quarterbacks that have great schedules during weeks 14, 15, and 16, starting with Sam Darnold of the New York Jets. Last week, he was 19 of 30 for 293 yards and 4 TDs against the weak Washington secondary. He should be added to your rosters for the looming playoffs because his schedule is so good during the playoffs. Having depth at quarterback during the playoffs is important, so you know about 2 quarterbacks I just mentioned. Let me give you another quarterback you should add for depth in your playoffs, or maybe you just need him to compete this week because of injuries or bye weeks. And that is Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback Nick Foles. He was 33 of 47 for 296 yards and 2 TDs. He's back from injury, and his playoff schedule in weeks 14, 15, and 16 is favorable. I always am stacked at quarterback during the playoffs. I not only sometimes have 2, but if I have roster spots, I usually pick up 3 just to make sure the guy I'm playing against can't beat me with a quarterback. So, let me give you another quarterback you should keep an eye on in case you need a win in week 12, and that's the Detroit Lions' Jeff Driscoll. He was 15 of 26 for 206 yards with 2 TDs, and he rushed 8 times for 51 yards and another TD. With the injuries to Matthew Stafford, he's got a broken bone in his back. You think the Detroit Lions may want to give him the rest of the year off, or maybe just want to sit him down until he feels comfortable about playing. But I'll tell you what, Jeff Driscoll plays this week. He's got a sweet matchup against the Washington Redskins, and he's going to have another big day. So I may want to pick him up and play him just to cash in for week 12. Let me give you some defenses that'll help you in week 12 or to keep for your playoff run in 2019. Starting with the Cleveland Browns versus the Miami Dolphins. Cleveland has a great schedule weeks 14, 15, and 16. Or maybe you just need a defense this week, and that's the Detroit Lions against the Washington Redskins. The Redskins continue to struggle because of their rookie quarterback and their poor offensive line play. They just don't have a lot of good players in Washington, and Detroit has a decent defense. Cleveland lost their best player in Myles Garrett because of the unfortunate situation that happened last Thursday, and other players are going to be suspended on that defense also. But I still like them this week against a poor Miami offense. Let me give you 2 up-and-coming defenses that can help you the rest of the year, or maybe just for week 12, like the Atlanta Falcons versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the Buffalo Bills against the Denver Broncos. Tell you what, Tampa Bay turns the ball over like 4 or 5 times a game. I've never seen anything like it. Their quarterback's given up like 4 pick sixes. And I'll tell you what, he's going up against a surging Atlanta defense that's looking to take advantage of him. Same deal with Denver. Denver's actually playing well. They played well against Minnesota. Probably should have won that game last week. But Buffalo's defense is really good. And I think they're going to go after Denver. So I'd be looking at picking up Buffalo if you can. They're probably not available in your league. But just in case they are, go get them. Let me give you some kickers that'll help you in the future. Starting with the Green Bay Packers, Mason Crosby. Or the Seattle Seahawks, Jason Myers. Both were on bye last week, so they may be available on your waiver wire. Hey, best time to get a kicker is when the team's on bye. People have to cut their kickers because they need a roster spot. So if you can go out there and get one of those 2 kickers, I'd go out and do it. They're not bad. They might not be top 10, but I'm sure they're close, and they're very good. Okay, there it is. Week 12 waiver wire. In summary, look, we got to stack our teams for the playoffs, or maybe you just need a win for week 12. Either way, the waiver wire is the way to do it. I gave you some great players. You should be okay for this week. My name is Buster Brown. The show's Redemption Rehab. Good luck.